Hi, my name is Sarah Meeks, and I am studying investigative journalism this year. So the best way to kind of describe myself and where I'm coming from is to start with a story. So 2 years ago, I traveled to Guatemala for the second time in my life, and I was there on a 2-week mission trip, serving with some other high school students from my church. And one day, about a week into the trip, we hiked up a mountain in order to get to this secluded village at the top so that we could help them because they were in extreme poverty, and we were there to do whatever service project they needed. So when we finally got up there after a 5-hour hike up this treacherous mountain trail, we got up there and we're like, "Hi, what can we do for you? What service would be beneficial for you?" And they were like, "Can you paint our church blue?" And we were like, "What? What are they talking about?" And so they gave us this really tacky blue paint, and they were like, "Just paint our church. That's what we need." So we were like, "Okay, it's their call, it's their village, we'll do whatever they want." So we started painting their church, and it was interesting getting to talk to them. Some of the kids were shy and would peek out from the church and run back in, and the grown-ups kind of joined in and helped us paint. So I got to start talking with them in my broken Spanish. We were conversing, and I found out that they were having us paint their church blue, this bright blue color, because the bugs down there are opposed to the bright colors. It keeps them away, and the church down there was the door was open, no actual door, no glass in the windows. So it was a way for them to keep bugs out of their church while they were in the service. So I thought that was so cool that they have this team who is there to serve them, and they choose to do something in order to make their church services more for them to be able to focus more. So I thought that was awesome, and it was incredible getting to talk to them while I was there. So then after we finished painting the church, I had a moment where the team was kind of eating some dinner, and I went out and climbed out on that tree right there, which was on the edge of the mountain. And it was kind of a life-changing moment for me, thinking about them and being out on the tree. I was able to stare out there, just breathe in the crisp air in Guatemala, feel the wind, see the mountains, that's Honduras in the background, and just looking at everything that God has created and looking at all of the places out there, all of the villages that were in need of help. It kind of gave me this defining moment that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, is be able to serve others in other countries. And for me, that's kind of shown most in a form of protecting others. I've realized, kind of thinking about that moment and other moments in my life, I've always been the person who, when a bug's about to be squished, I'm like, no, I'll take it outside. Or if my brother isn't, if people are bullying my brother, I am, not okay with that. They will know that that is not a good thing. Or if someone's sitting alone at lunch, I'll be the person to go and invite them to my table. So, thinking about all that, I realized that I'm a protector. And because of that, last year I studied criminal justice as my topic, and I mentored with Reiner Drolshagen from the FBI. He is he's now the assistant special agent in charge of the Charlotte FBI office, and he was my mentor last year. And what I kind of learned, I love the FBI and I love the idea of going into a government agency, but I learned that to do that, you don't study criminal justice in college. So I was like, okay, what else do I love? And I started thinking, based on Guatemala and Honduras, where I went the past summer, and I'm going back this summer, I love other countries, and I love the idea of being able to help people in foreign places by uncovering corruption, because I don't want to stand for corruption to be allowed. I'm all about finding the cause of the problem and dealing with it. So I was thinking about that and the fact that I love writing, and I was like, I should consider investigative journalism. So I talked to some people and decided to study that this year in ISM, which has been awesome, and it's been great. So my kind of plan so far is to study investigative journalism, possibly do investigative or international affairs in college with a minor in journalism, and then take that into investigative journalism, do that for years, and then start in the FBI. So kind of the defining reason that I'm kind of focusing on all this is John 15:13, which is my life verse, which is, "Greater love has none than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." And that's just the way I want to live, is to be able to be used by others constantly in everything I do. So I don't know what I'm doing for college yet, still trying to figure that all out, but I'll let you guys know when I do. So my quote for this year is, "Never be afraid to raise your voice for honesty and truth and compassion against injustice and lying and greed. If people all over the world would do this, it would change the earth." And I think that's a great quote for investigative journalism, because what I've learned so far, one of the main things is that there are a lot of investigative journalists and journalists in general that will find the stories that they feel like will get them awards or recognition instead of going after what really needs to be told. So, or what's hard to tell. Like, there are stories that you just don't want to get involved in because you know it's not going to go well. But if I'm going to take this career, I don't want to get sucked into that, and I want to be able to truly investigate and talk about what really needs to be heard. So the first step of the ISM process is research and figuring out what your topic is and what you're doing for the year. So I kind of looked into investigative journalism, like what is it about investigative journalism that makes it different than just journalism? So it is the type of journalism that tries to discover information of public interest that someone is trying to hide. That's what makes it different, really, is other kinds of journalism, you'll like cover a sports game or cover an event, but you're not trying to uncover information. So that makes investigative journalism kind of the notorious ones that a lot of people don't like if they're trying to hide something because you're there to uncover it. But that's what I'm looking to do, so I'm excited about that. I also found that the field of journalism is shrinking and growing in different ways. It's really complicated. I've talked on all of my 9 interviews, I heard different people give different opinions on the matter. Like, some of the people in the print newspapers or the print news were like, yeah, the field's shrinking, I don't know if you want to go into this. But then other people, a freelance journalist, and some people from like Channel 8 News were like, girl, this is a good field to go into. There's so much you can do with journalism if you know how to apply it. Like, it's not just writing for a newspaper. There's for the news online, for the news in magazines, in TV, everything. So I'm excited about that it's kind of a versatile field. And I just found this very interesting. Investigative journalism was actually kind of started, the idea, like it had been around, but it kind of came to the surface in the Watergate scandal, which I thought was really cool. It was when there was all the issues with President Nixon, like hiding information and stuff, and 2 reporters from the Washington Post knew that stuff was going on, and they were like, hey, Washington Post, let's cover this, let's figure out what's going on. And the newspaper was like, we can't do that. We're going to lose everything if we do that. The president will shut us down. So then these 2 journalists were like, okay, we'll do it on our own. So they quit their jobs and started trying to figure everything out on their own. And once they had uncovered the story and they had like irrefutable proof, then the Washington Post took them back and they were able to reveal everything that had happened. And that's when the country really realized, wow, we would never have known about any of this, and he would still be in office if it were not for the investigative reporters. So that's kind of what brought it to the surface, and people really saw then, like, oh wow, this actually is an important field. So the next step of the ISM journey is your interviews. And I had interviews with several individuals, or 9 people, kind of the mismatched people, like the people who weren't in an organization or group, were a freelance journalist named Leslie Thompson. She was my first interview, and it was a really good way to start because every ISM student is a little nervous on their first interview, even if they are a second-year student. But it was really good because she was so sweet and encouraging and bought me lunch, and it was great. But her view was that the field is not shrinking. You just have to know how to adjust. You can't just be stagnant, because that's why the field in the first place, like the newsprint, is going out of business, because they didn't adjust and adapt when they were seeing the world transform over to technology. They were like, people will always want their morning news, and so they didn't make an effort, and now they're paying for it. So that was the main thing I learned from her. I also talked to 2 college professors, and they had a lot of great information too about what classes you should take, the fact that you don't want to major in journalism, you want to minor in it and then get expertise in another field as well. So I thought that was interesting. And then I also interviewed several people from the Dallas Morning News: Todd Roberson, William Pry, Miles Moffett, and Sue Ambrose. Todd Roberson is an editorial writer now, but he used to be like an international investigative journalist, and he actually has won a Pulitzer Prize. So that was really, really neat to talk to him, because that's like the biggest award you can get in journalism. So that was really exciting. And then William Pry is on, he's like a sports writer and then just a column writer right now. And he was actually a mentor last year, so talking to him was great because he had kind of a inside scoop on ISM. And then Miles Moffett and Sue Ambrose are both investigative writers. So that was really cool, getting to hear a woman's perspective on everything, because I've kind of noticed it's harder to find women investigative journalists. And I was like, why is that? And so she was able to kind of explain, like, it really has been a male-dominated field, but it's making a transition now, she thinks, and in a lot of places women are actually, I guess, like, more prevalent in the field. They talked about how, like, you have to be willing to make a difference, and the difference you make is astronomical if you're willing to go out on a limb. It's not a field where you can just breeze on through, find a story here and there. You have to be able to dig, and you have to be curious as well. You can't just walk through life without asking questions, or you're not going to find stories. That's one thing that's key for every investigative journalist, is to be able to look at things and be like, why is that? And kind of be able to go off of it from there. So I thought that was really cool. They also explained that working for Dallas Morning News and a lot of other newspapers, you don't have a time limit on how long your story, like there's not like a deadline for most of their stories, because the people there understand that that investigating is a difficult process, and they don't want you to cut short the potential of the story just to meet a deadline. So I thought that was really smart. But because of that, you also have to be very motivated, so you don't just drag it out because there's not a deadline. They also said you can't just jump right into investigative reporting necessarily. It's a field that's kind of harder to get into. It's like a side field of journalism, and you may have to spend a few years in another field before you do it. Like Sue Ambrose was like a science column writer before she went into the investigative part of journalism. And then I also had 2 interviews at Channel 8 News in downtown Dallas. It's actually right across the street from Dallas Morning News, so I thought that was cool. And I absolutely loved it. There's kind of a different feeling for the TV news versus the print news, just because you have a lot more like deadlines day to day, because there's like morning news and afternoon news and evening news. So there's constantly chaos, and the newsroom actually feels like a newsroom. Like at Dallas Morning News, it's all kind of quiet now because everyone's just typing on their computers and sending emails. But at Channel 8, people are like screaming at each other from across the room, and it just feels more alive, and what I kind of was hoping our newsroom would feel like. And it's cool because there's all like the cubicles and things set up, and then there's the main place where they actually shoot, and it's in the same room. And it's just really neat how everything's like condensed, and then there's offices lining the whole area. But I just loved the environment, and it was really neat hearing about it. And I guess one of the main things that I talked about with the investigative journalists there, I interviewed Byron Harris and Jason Trahan, who are both on the investigative team. Something that Byron Harris said was really cool was he gave this example of a hospital metaphor. Like investigative journalism, it's such a tough field because it's like being a doctor where someone comes in. Well, first of all, it's not like someone comes into the hospital. You have to go out and pick a person out on the street, and then you have to decide, are they really sick or are they not really sick? And if they are really sick, what do they have? And then if they are sick, how do you cure them? He's like, it's this long process of like, you have to literally find everything. You have to find the story, find who's involved in the story and what the problem is, and then how to solve the problem. It's just all up to you. So I thought that was really interesting. It's not just something where someone hands you a piece of paper and like, here's a story, I want you to find the solution. You have to go out and find everything. So I thought that was cool. I also had an interview at Fox 4 News with Becky Oliver, who is another award-winning investigative journalist, and talking to her was really neat too, because Fox 4 isn't just like local news, it's like the national level, and she has been in it for so many years. She was actually, when she started, she was one of the only like couple female investigative journalists in the United States. And she said the main thing she drove home was you have to have a thick skin. It's not going to be an easy field because any story that you tell, you're going to be making some people mad. And she's had death threats. She's had people follow her home, that kind of thing. And she's like, you have to get used to that, and you have to be willing to deal with it. And if you truly care about what you're doing, it's okay. Like, you're going to be okay with it because you know that you're fighting for a good cause. So I thought that was really cool that she had that kind of passion for what she's doing. So I ended up mentoring with Jason Trahan and Byron Harris from Channel 8 News. That's Byron Harris. And it was honestly like so exciting to be able to gain a mentorship with him. I've talked to other individuals. My grandparents know who he is. Like, a bunch of people know who he is. If you watch the news, you'll be like, oh yeah, Byron Harris, I've heard of him, I've seen him. And he's arguably the best investigative reporter in the United States. So the fact that I am getting to spend time with him is just incredible. He is well known for some of his stories. He will not stand down. He covered stories on the Russian mafia, tensions in the Congo, and Area 51. And he was actually arrested during the Area 51 kind of controversy because he refused to put up his camera during all of everything that was going on, and he was arrested because of that. So he's one of those people who takes his job seriously, and if he knows he's just fighting for like your rights to, like the right to information, like he's not going to give up. So I thought that was really, really neat. And then Jason Trahan is my other mentor, and he works on the opposite side of the field as Mr. Harris. He's like, he does the kind of editing and kind of the stuff in the office while Mr. Harris goes out on the interviews. But he's an investigative reporter as well, and he absolutely loves Channel 8. He used to work at Dallas Morning News, and then he moved over, and he loves having the choice of what he wants to investigate. That's what he thinks is really cool, like being able to have an impact on what people view in society, because you're able to see, okay, this is something that needs to be told, and then you go and tell it. He even said, I get paid to do this. He loves his job, and that's what I wanted in a mentor, is someone who is passionate and loves what they're doing. So that was really exciting. And then, so the next step after all that is going into your original work. And my original work was an interesting process where we kind of were talking, like, what do we want to do? We want to do something that will give me an idea of what it's like to actually be an investigative journalist, but we didn't want something extremely hard, and we knew that we were wanting to do a story for my final presentation, but we wanted this to be like a separate event. So our kind of goals that we came up with before we decided on it was we wanted it to be something that could be beneficial to my mentors, could be educational about the field of investigative journalism, something that was interesting too, so I wouldn't just get bored and think this field is boring. It would also be beneficial to society. So, going off of that, we decided to learn about the process of filing for open records requests, or FOIAs, which is like the national level of that. So that's kind of this process that journalists use a lot. It's where a journalist, or anyone, any citizen can do this, but mainly just journalists use this, or like people in like the FBI and stuff like that. It's a process of asking by law for someone to send you information. It could be like the emails of public officials, or records or phone calls, texts, anything that you think is beneficial for uncovering like a scandal. And so I read up on the laws. There's like 3 laws pertaining to that, and I kind of learned the ropes for that. And then we decided to do the open records request and the FOIA in regards to the earthquake situation that had been going on in Irving, and that's kind of still going on, but it's not as much in the headlines anymore. With like all the earthquakes that they thought maybe were happening because of fracking, but like all over Irving. And that was a story that my mentors were working on, so they were like, well, you can do the open records request and the FOIA regarding that story, and then we'll use that information that we give back to help like push the story along. So we decided to send an open records request to the city of Irving, which was interesting. I got to write it out. I wrote it out all by myself, and like we kind of planned it out, and then my mentor looked over it, and we sent it in to the city of Irving, asking for emails between the mayor and city council and other members and this one seismologist, Craig Pearson, because he's been kind of heading up all of the media on like talking to the media about the earthquake situation, and some of the stuff he said, you're kind of like, are you telling the whole story here? So we wanted to see if any more information was out there from the mayor and from other people. So that was really interesting, getting to fill that out, and they got back to us pretty quickly, and they gave us some emails that were interesting for my mentors to see, because it kind of led onto this new idea, and I'll explain that in a minute. But we also sent the FOIA, which is like the national version of an open records request. We sent it to the United States Geological Survey, which is centered in California, and they kind of oversee and look at all earthquake activity. So we wanted to see if they had talked to anyone in the Irving area about things that had been going on. So we drafted this letter and sent it to them as well. But it was an interesting experience. This one you have to be a little more formal, and you have to write exactly what you want, because if you leave any loopholes, like if you say emails to this person but you don't say with attachments, they won't send you the emails with attachments, that kind of thing. You have to make sure you get every little piece of information. So they took a little longer to get back to us, but when they did, they had some interesting emails as well, which kind of led my mentors on this path. We were looking at it. They had been thinking that the earthquakes were happening when like the drilling was happening for the fracking. That was kind of their lead that they were going off of. But when they received the emails, they kind of saw that they think it's more because of the refining process. After the oil has already been taken out, but then it's taken to a refinery, they think that's not being properly regulated. And so that was really cool to kind of figure out. And then off of that, we had a little more time with the original work. So we're like, okay, we'll add to it. And something that's important for any investigative journalist is to have footage of like online, or not online, like live footage of what you're talking about. So they wanted to go to some of these refining places and see like what was going on. But the locations of these places are hard to find, and so we found this one website, and I was able to track all of the oil refinery plants, I guess, in Dallas County and Tarrant County, and then I made maps of them for my mentors, and they picked the ones that were like active. I made a list of the ones that were active, the ones that were shut down, the ones that were not currently drilling, and then they went to some of the active ones and were able to talk to people there and get some footage on them. So that was really neat. Just being able to help them in the process of making a story was awesome. So this first video was kind of like a preview video they did. It was just kind of to pique the interest of the viewers. And then the second one is the actual, the story that Byron did. There were like 3 other stories done on it as well, but his, he's my mentor, so I showed his.
Was another earthquake.
You want answers?
Why all of a sudden do we have earthquakes?
We do too.
These earthquakes are not minor to us.
So we sent the best investigative team in the nation to
That's
get some.
Byron.
All this week, News 8 investigates the controversial link between drilling and a growing North Texas earthquake problem. From what top seismologists have to say, to the extreme actions other states have taken on the fracking industry, we travel the country to get answers for you. News 8 investigates tonight at 10.
Yeah, so that was their little, I guess their,
There was another earthquake.
no. Okay, I'll just leave it there. That was their kind of blurb giving you an idea of what the story was about. And then Byron's story, yeah. And
Escape points on your own. The incredibly spacious.
Earthquakes. History tells us they don't happen here, but they are.
As you are. According to a Columbia University geologist, the number of earthquakes in the central United States is up 1,000% in the last 30 years. But why? Well, this week, News 8 reporters will take you to 4 states talking to homeowners. We'll talk to scientists.
Byron went to
state
Ohio,
officials,
and I was able
find
to
some
contact
answers.
him while he was
But
there and
before
see what was
you
going
can
on.
understand those answers, you have to really know what you're talking about. So tonight, Byron Harris explains.
Irving 911, this is Christy. What's your emergency? I want to know if we just had an earthquake.
I've lived in Texas for 45 years and Irving for 35. Why all of a sudden do we have earthquakes in 1 year?
We just dealt it as well. Oh my God, it's shook my whole. I know, it shook the whole police department.
You guys are coming more frequent now, 3 to 4 times, maybe a day.
I just never had it shake that bad. It scared me too.
We don't get earthquakes here.
They didn't get them in Denver either until 1967, when the Rocky Mountain Arsenal injected millions of gallons of hazardous waste 2/3 of a mile underground, near the city. 3 magnitude 5 earthquakes damaged highways and homes. In Japan, scientists took note of what happened in Denver, because Japan is always in peril from deadly quakes. A then young seismologist named Masakazu Otaki drilled an experimental well in Japan and injected water into it. 50 quakes happened.
We didn't understand that water injection does cause earthquakes.
There's a lot of oil and gas production.
Cliff Froelich, a UT geologist, literally wrote the book on Texas earthquakes.
In the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of cases where there are earthquakes that within a couple miles of injection wells. Quite credible evidence that a lot of these cases that the injection is related to that.
An injection waste disposal well is a product of oil and gas drilling. When modern oil and gas wells are drilled, they bore into an energy deposit horizontally. They are fractured to free the oil and gas. Millions of gallons of water, sand, and chemicals are used in the process. That water, now turned into salt water, has to be removed for the energy to be harvested. And all that water has to be disposed of. Injection waste disposal wells are drilled to do that.
There are dozens of waste disposal wells in North Texas where thousands of gallons of frac waste are pumped back into underground formations.
This injection waste disposal well in Tarrant County is permitted to inject more than 1 million gallons of salt water a day, about 2 miles deep. Waste trucks from many wells bring their frac waste here, where the salt water is separated and pumped underground. This map shows all the injection disposal
That was
wells in
me.
8 North Texas counties, according to the
That was
Texas
me.
Railroad
Yeah,
Commission. Each is permitted to pump a certain amount of waste to a certain depth, depending on the geology of the location.
And some disposal wells are just two guys, a truck.
That was the main thing I wanted to show was the map and then Byron talking about it. But yeah, it was really cool to be able to help them on that project. And it's kind of going to be one of those ongoing things where they'll monitor the wells and see what's happening. And if the earthquakes continue, they'll report on it again. So having that as my original work was awesome. And it was such a cool experience. And it felt awesome to actually be helping on a real story. That's pretty much all I have. Again, my quote is, "Never be afraid to raise your voice for honesty and truth and compassion against injustice and lying and greed. If people all over the world would do this, it would change the earth." And that's what I plan to do, and that's why I am doing this, and I'm so excited to see what happens with my final product, and I can't wait to let you guys know how it goes. So, thank you.